Hello, my name's Tom Walker. Welcome to this Focus Employment Hub podcast. In this edition, John Perry is talking to Louise Watson from the Merseyside Youth Association. John starts off by asking Louise to explain her role there.
I work for Merseyside Youth Association. I work on a programme called Talent Match. We work with the long-term unemployed young people. My specific role, I'm participation worker, so it's my job to speak to young people on the programme and amplify their voices and their experiences. But as part of that, I also run a youth food bank.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into youth work and why you decided to get into youth work?
It took me a while. I'd say it was about 5 or 6 years ago. I was really keen on the idea. I love reading and writing personally, and I was keen on encouraging young people to read and write, to tell their stories, to share their experiences, and to learn from others about their experiences. So I started looking into it with that in mind. And then I found an apprenticeship at Merseyside Youth Association because I was finding youth work hard to get into, to get qualifications, or to not have qualifications, but to get in volunteering. It seemed difficult to get into for a while. And then I found this apprenticeship at Merseyside Youth Association. It was as apprentice mentor. So I spent 2 years as an apprentice at Merseyside Youth Association, learning the trade, getting qualified, learning from other staff. And then I went on to become a mentor. And then once the participation worker role came up, that's when I went across for that.
With regards to the work that you mentioned there before, you mentioned that you work on a talent match programme, which is around employment, if I understand it. Now, the stereotypical thing is, young people are not looking for work, don't want to bother looking for work in some cases and things like that. What's your experience of young people in terms of, getting into work and looking for work, etc.?
I would agree that is one of the stereotypes of young people, definitely. But I would have to say from personal experience, it couldn't be further from the truth. Obviously, there are going to be people from all walks of life in that situation. But the young people that I have the pleasure of meeting are really, really keen to get into work, or to get back into work, to get into education, to get into training. And some of these young people have got multiple barriers. So some of the people that we talk to maybe only have 1 or 2 barriers, but a lot of the people that come to us have got multiple barriers. So barriers, for example, would be mental health, low mood, which then leads to becoming demotivated. A lack of family support would be a barrier. Being a care leaver might be a barrier. Not having English as your first language might be a barrier. Being a single parent or a young carer. So there are quite a lot of things that are classed as barriers, and a lot of the young people that we work with have multiple barriers, which we then help them to break down. And the people that we meet are really so keen to be in the world of work or education or training, and they just need a bit of an extra hand to get there.
In terms of the barriers, you mentioned that you can help them address them. So how would you go about doing that then?
Each person that comes onto the programme, they get a mentor. And when they're signed up to the programme, they would meet with their mentor and they would put together a little bit of an action plan. And that is all based around what each participant wants to achieve. So that might be, they might have a clear idea of what they want to do, or they might have no idea and they might need to try some things, or they might have been socially isolated for 3 or 4 years and not really come out of the bedroom, in which case that would be around sort of socializing. So before we even look at the employability side of things and the career training, volunteering side of things, we look at the softer skills, such as confidence building, social skills, being in groups, learning life skills, cooking, budgeting. And one of the main things that I would say, that one of the main and first things we try to address is mental health issues. Because if you're struggling with your mental health really, really badly, then that is going to be a barrier for getting into work. So we work with YPAS, Young Persons Advisory Service, and then we also have our own internal counsellors as well. So if anyone is struggling with their mental health, we can address that straight away. And then through that, they will hopefully learn coping skills and be able to move on to the next part of that journey, whether that's social skills, as we said, or volunteering, or maybe they know what they want to do and they just need a little bit of help getting a qualification or doing the CV.
You also mentioned, and to be honest with you, I've often thought about in the current climate, I find it pretty shocking that anybody's facing food poverty. But you mentioned that you've got a food bank for young people. So what's all that about?
Well, it is shocking, isn't it, John? It's not a good thing, is it? But we, on the programme, on the Talent Match programme, we were coming across a lot of young people who were hungry. So we set up our own food bank so that young people could access. And yesterday, it was our 5-year birthday yesterday.
Right.
So we find a lot of different reasons for people accessing us. Anyone who's struggling basically with food, we try and help out as much as we can.
Why do people come to you then, kind of in need of food? What brings them to you in that case?
So there's many different reasons, to be honest, John. And I don't think it starts with food poverty. I think there's other things happening. There's got to be other things happening to push you into food poverty. Now, whether that's maybe going on to a new benefit and there being a wait time and you're getting into debt through that, or you've come off a benefit and you've gone into work, but you've got to, that first month you don't actually get paid, so you've got to find a way to survive in that month. We see a lot of people who are homeless, so people who have just unstable living conditions, or they live in hostels, or they are sofa surfing. There are a lot of people sofa surfing that we see. And then care leavers, anyone who's particularly vulnerable, really.
In terms of, once you've addressed the food poverty then, what I would say to you is, being devil's advocate for a minute, if people are thinking, hang on a minute, young people, food poverty, they're squandering all their money, and coming for help for food, what would you say to people like that, who people were thinking like that?
Well, first of all, I would explain that is the reason that we set up, that is one of the main reasons we set up our own food bank, is because young people were very aware of that misconception.
Yeah.
So we wanted to set up a place that was non-judgmental, so these people could come and access help without feeling judged. But then I would also say that accessing a food bank is not, I don't think it's something that most people would do lightly. And we speak to people when they access, and we check in with them. So it's not just a case of giving someone some food, them going away and then coming back the next week, getting some food and going away. We would talk about budgeting, we would signpost to other services, and we would try and get to the root of why that food poverty was happening. Is it because you're not getting enough benefits? Is it because you're in debt and we need to sort that out? Is it because you do struggle with your money, in which case we need to help with budgeting? So we would try and get to the bottom of the reason for accessing the food bank, and we would address those issues, because what we want, what ideally what we would want, is to not exist and for people to not have to access us. So yeah, we don't want people to be dependent on us, so we signpost people into other things and try really to address the reason for the food poverty in the first place.
You mentioned that some of the individuals have mental health issues. Are there any other individuals or groups that highlight in particular difficulties or problems, say, for example, BME groups, or kind of disabled people, or, other sections of the community, I guess?
People in the BME community, that's definitely up there. Then care leavers is a big subsection as well, because a lot of care leavers find themselves, at 16 or 18 kind of on their own, and they a lot of them don't necessarily have the life skills to keep a flat, to pay all the bills, to do everything that they need to do without that support. So care leavers is a big one. People with disabilities, people with undiagnosed learning difficulties and autism, that's something that we see quite often as well. because I mean, I guess it's a struggle even if you do have a diagnosis, but if you don't have a diagnosis, you can't really access support and you can't really explain to services unless you have a diagnosis.
Are there particular times of the year that you find, that young people struggle? I mean, for example, we're coming up to Christmas and that now, aren't we? So are there any particular issues that you think that young people face in terms of particular times of the year, be that Christmas or...
I would say the 2 times of year that we are busiest is the summer. We are particularly busy in the summer. And I would put that down to the school holidays. And then around this time of year as well, around Christmas. Because I think if you're struggling financially, Christmas is hard. I mean, Christmas can be stressful, even if you're not struggling. There are sometimes Christmas can bring up positive and negative things for people, can't it? But if you're struggling financially, I think that makes it more difficult. There are lots of expectations around Christmas for food, presents, attending parties, traveling. It can snowball. But then also, even if you weren't struggling financially, but you might be maybe vulnerable or socially isolated, then Christmas is also going to be really hard. So if you're socially isolated and financially struggling, then Christmas probably will be hard. But normally, especially in Liverpool and surrounding areas, there are normally a lot of community efforts on Christmas Day. So the Florey, Everton in the community, there are lots of places that will open up a church hall or a community centre, get volunteers and put on a Christmas dinner, and they would put on transport. Now, obviously, this year things are a lot different, and I haven't really heard of very many places putting anything on. So I'm still waiting to hear back from people on who might possibly be doing that. Also, because a lot of services shut down for 2 weeks over Christmas, or they go to a reduced service, and food banks are on a reduced opening and closing times. Plus, if you need a food bank voucher for a food bank, you have to get that from someone. And if there's a reduced service, that's going to be difficult. Then also, I'm not sure how many people know this about food banks, but if you're given a food bank voucher on a Monday, you have 3 days to use it. So if you don't use it by the Thursday, if you turned up on the Friday, they would be able to turn you away because you have to use that voucher within 3 days. So over Christmas, that is going to be more tough because there's a reduced service for everything.
What's interesting, if I've understood you, is that you don't actually you're not required to have vouchers and things to use the food bank at your place. Is that right?
That's right, John. Yeah, that was one of the main things that we said in the first place that we wanted to implement, because not everyone knows how to get a voucher, who to get a voucher from. And then obviously, like I say, once you get that voucher, you've got 3 days to use it, which in itself can be quite difficult if you can't access a food bank that's open in your area within those 3 days, or say if you've got small children and you're not able to carry it, or if you've got a disability, or you would struggle to get there and back. And then also there's a limit to the amount of times that you can access a food bank within a certain amount of time. So when we were first consulting with young people and they were sanctioned for 3 months, one food parcel that is meant to last you 3 days wasn't going to cover that. So we said, right, we don't want limits, we don't want vouchers, but what we'll do is we'll work with each person to break down the barriers.
You mentioned earlier on that you were supporting people in the Liverpool area, but I understand that you go further afield and you can offer support throughout Merseyside. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. So we work right across Liverpool City region. The Talent Match works across Liverpool City region, so we thought we may as well too. So that's Liverpool, Knowsley, Sefton, Wirral, St Helens and Halton.
And coming back to before about you saying you're not 100% sure about how people can be supported in terms of getting help with, like, I don't know, Christmas meals and foods like that. Interestingly enough, I was listening to the radio today and there was a particular, because you mentioned young carers before, and there's an organisation that offers meals to young carers and things like that. Is that something that MYA can do, or put people in touch with if they need help or food, or at least a Christmas meal if they're on their own or something like that?
Yes, definitely. So the more information that we have, the more community events that we know about, the more we can signpost people to those things.
And you also mentioned as well that you've got an interest in equality issues. Can you expand a little bit on that and kind of tell me what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, so one of my big passions is, it stems from one of my main passions being equal access to opportunities for everyone. Where I've grown up, I have seen people in different socioeconomic circumstances get access to very different opportunities, and within that, I guess, comes people with disabilities, people in the LGBT community. I myself am in the LGBT community, so it's just something that I'm very passionate about, just speaking about and raising awareness about, and making sure that the young people that access us know that they're welcome and that they're supported and that it's a safe space for them.
So are you able to expand on, you mentioned LGBT issues. I mean, what do you think the issues would be around there then, particularly for young people?
Well, if I am coming from the food bank point of view, the majority of the people that we see in the LGBT community are homeless, or they've got unstable living arrangements, and that's usually due to family breakdowns.
Right.
So whether that's family not being understanding, which can lead also to domestic violence, that's another thing that's also going to be exacerbated by coronavirus, because everyone's been stuck in together, haven't we? So if you do still live at home in a place with family tensions, then that's probably going to be more difficult. We have seen an increase in domestic violence, just not with young people, but just generally in the UK over these last 8-9 months. And specifically with our young people, I would say we have seen an increase in disclosures of family tensions and domestic violence, I
am aware that hate crime has increased with regards to disability. Would you say that that's true of either young people or BAME groups or LGBT groups? How do you feel about that?
Yes, I would definitely say that I agree. It's a it's something that I find massively difficult, but we try our best to support every young person that we meet. So whether that's reporting the hate crime, or we do have on Talent Match, we have a specialist group called Your Way, and they work with young people with disabilities or learning difficulties or long-term conditions. And they get very specific targeted support, and they've got their own employability mentor who can help with those additional barriers. And
you also mentioned, you mentioned it a few times actually, about giving young people a voice. What do you mean by that?
Basically, just means one of the ways that that the young people that we work with are described as hard to reach. So that just means either they're socially isolated or they don't engage with services, in which case their voices aren't heard. So my job is to speak to the young people that might be hardest to reach. They might not be engaging with any services. They might distrust services because they've had a bad experience. They might not feel, there are all kinds of different barriers as to getting into participation. So if you don't feel confident, you might not want to speak up, especially in a group situation. If you don't feel like you can articulate yourself, then that will probably stop you. Or you might feel like nobody cares what you've got to say. And I know a lot of young people that I speak to do feel like that. So the more that we can speak to young people and ask their opinions. So something that we did recently, we worked with Liverpool City Council to consult with young people around the vulnerable adolescent strategy. So basically, it's just speaking to young people, getting their opinion, getting their feedback, getting them to implement decision making basically, and make sure that the decisions that are being made for them are that they agree with.
Now, we've tried to explore some of the issues that obviously you're working with on a daily basis and things like that. I want to try and think a bit more positively going forward now. So let's take a step back. In terms of the food poverty, if you were to say, particularly around about Christmas time, what would you be saying to people with regards to food poverty and young people?
I would reiterate that if there's any problem, we can look into it, and we will try our best to help people overcome any barriers that they're facing. Barriers can be overcome. One thing I would say is reach out to services if you're struggling. There are a lot of services in Liverpool. There are even a lot of Facebook groups, sort of community Facebook groups. There's COVID response groups, there's People Help the People. So I would say reach out if you're struggling. If you know of a service that can help you, contact them. And there are things that can be done. There are things that we can do to help make the situation better. We just need to tackle one thing at a time.
Okay, now we'll be drawing to a close shortly. So I wanted to finish with a couple of things really. I wanted to say, if you had a magic wand or, to give somebody the best present that they could have as a young person for Christmas, what would that be?
That would definitely, for me, be equal access to opportunities for all young people. It basically means that no matter if you're a minority, if you're maybe got extra barriers, then I believe that everyone should have the same access to education, to social activities, to additional educational things like music, sports, and then life skills, higher education, university, and also going into work as well.
Okay, now I just want to give you a bit of an opportunity before we close down and finish to give any contact details or information that you would like to give. So this is your opportunity really to say how you might be contacted or how other people might contact the organisation.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So my full name is Louise Watson. My email address is LUISEW, so that's Louise without an O, W, at mya.org.uk. We are on Twitter at Youth Food Bank MYA. We are on Facebook and Instagram as MYA Youth Food Bank.
Okay, that's great. Are you able to be contacted by phone or would you prefer not?
Yes, yeah, you can contact me by phone. My work number is 07801 581 978.
Okay, so I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking you for taking part in the podcast today. And for people listening, I'd like to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, as this will be my last one before Christmas. Take care, everyone, and thanks for your time, Louise.
Thanks, John.
John Perry and Louise Watson there. To find out more about the Focus Employment Hub, you can visit their website at www.focusemployment.co.uk. That's www.focusemployment.co.uk. Thanks for listening and have a Merry Christmas. Goodbye.